Okay, so we all know what it's like trying to make a good decision, right? When the easy way out is right there tempting you. But what if there was a way to make those tough choices a little clearer? That's what we're diving into today. We're going back to 1973, a speech that even after all these years still has some seriously good advice.
Yeah, it's amazing how relevant it still is,
Really?
right? This speech was given by Eldon Tanner.
Big name in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right?
Exactly. He was a prominent leader, but don't worry, this isn't about any one religion. Even though his faith is where he's coming from, what Tanner has to say about choices and what comes after, well, it's something everyone can learn from.
I'm with you on that. So he starts off with this powerful picture. He says, life is like a journey with a fork in the road. One path you're moving forward, the other path, not so much. And it got me thinking about this whole idea of agency, like having the actual power to choose our own way. Have you ever thought about how free will, like the fact that we even have it, wasn't always a sure thing?
It's a really interesting point because Tanner talks about this premortal council. It's like this big meeting in heaven where they're debating how things should be for humanity. And God's plan, the one where we get to choose, wins out over some other ideas, which is a pretty big deal when you think about it. We're not just puppets. We have real say in what we do. But that means we're also responsible for where those choices take us.
Okay, so big power, big responsibility, no pressure or anything, right? And just when you think it can't get any heavier, Tanner throws in another curveball. He says there's this adversary always trying to nudge us toward those not-so-great choices.
No, before we start imagining like a shadowy figure behind every bad decision.
Right, hiding in our closets.
Exactly. It's more about realizing that there are some very real things that can lead us astray, both from within and outside ourselves.
Oh, yeah, totally get that.
Yeah.
Like those late-night snacks calling your name.
Exactly. Or maybe even something like social media.
Ooh, good point. Always pulling you back in.
Right. Tanner uses the Garden of Eden as an example.
Classic temptation story.
It is. But instead of picturing a snake and an apple, think about what those things represent today.
So it's not just about those big dramatic choices, right? It's about those everyday things that can steer us off course if we let them.
Exactly. Tanner calls them drift temptations. Little things that might not seem like a big deal at the time, but can add up.
Drift temptations. I like that. It's so easy to just drift along with whatever's easiest.
Right. It takes real effort to actually steer ourselves in the right direction, like rowing a boat upstream.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Fighting against the current. So what's Tanner's advice? How do we do that?
Well, he talks about the importance of self-discipline.
Always a good one.
Definitely. He even gives a whole list of things that were messing people up back in his day. Things like indulging too much, not taking care of ourselves, stuff like that. Some things never change, right?
It's true. We're all still working on it.
Exactly. But here's what I find really interesting. He doesn't just stop at personal responsibility.
Oh, he goes bigger.
He does. He says it's not enough to just work on ourselves. We have to also look at the world around us, what's going on in society.
Okay, that's a good point. We're not isolated islands or anything.
Exactly. Tanner felt strongly that people need to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
So like being an active citizen,
Yeah.
getting involved.
Yeah. He talks about fighting against things like pornography, alcohol abuse, even laws that he thought were wrong. Basically anything that went against his values.
Wow. So he was pretty outspoken. It makes you wonder what he'd say about things today.
Right. It's an interesting thought experiment. The specifics might be different, but the idea is the same. We have a responsibility to make the world a better place, not just for ourselves, but for everyone.
Okay, so we're talking about making good choices, resisting temptation, standing up for what we believe in. Sounds like a lot to handle.
It is a lot. But Tanner doesn't want us to be afraid of the challenge. In fact, he says that opposition, those tough things we come up against, they're actually crucial for growth.
Wait, really? You mean like those times when things are hard? They're actually good for us.
That's exactly what he's saying. He compares it to a sailboat. You need wind resistance to actually move forward.
Okay, I think I get it. It's like those times when you really have to push yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a workout or a tough project at work. Those are the times you learn the most, right?
Exactly. You come out stronger on the other side. And it all comes back to that power of choice Tanner keeps talking about.
So it's not about avoiding hard things. It's about choosing how we handle them.
That's it. And it's such a hopeful message. He's basically saying, the world's full of challenges. Sure. But you're not a victim. You have the power to decide what you do next, how you're going to respond.
It's like that line from Spider-Man, with great power. You know how it goes.
Great responsibility.
Exactly. We've got this amazing gift. this agency to choose our own way. But we got to use it wisely.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us.
That's a lot to keep in mind. So if Tanner were here today, what do you think he'd say about everything going on?
Well, we already talked about how much things have changed. The internet, social media, all that.
All those choices.
Yeah.
Good and bad. At our fingertips, 24/7.
It's a lot to navigate. He might even connect it back to the environment, too.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Right. Back then, it wasn't as big of a deal. But today,
Yeah.
it's huge.
Totally.
Yeah.
So how do our choices impact the planet? That feels like something he'd definitely be talking about.
For sure. He'd probably challenge us to think about the bigger picture, not just about what's easy or convenient in the moment.
Okay, so think long term. Think about the consequences.
Exactly. And be willing to make those tough choices, even when they're not popular or easy.
It's like he's saying, don't just go with the flow. Be intentional, row against the current when you have to. It's been amazing diving into this speech from 1973. It's crazy how relevant it still is today.
Right. It shows how timeless these ideas really are. No matter what's happening in the world, we're always going to face choices, challenges, temptations.
And it's up to each of us to decide how we're going to handle them, to choose wisely and make the most of this one precious life we've got.
Well said. And that's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive, taking these big ideas, these timeless principles, and figuring out how they apply to our lives today.
Exactly. So the next time you're facing a tough choice, remember, you have the power to decide. Choose wisely, friends. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.